World War I, the Great War, a global conflict that shook the world from 1914 to 1918. It was a war unlike any other, a war that redefined violence and forever altered the course of human history. Millions of soldiers would perish in muddy trenches, victims of new technologies and old hatreds. Empires would crumble and the map of Europe would be redrawn in blood. This was a war that arose from a complex web of causes, a perfect storm of nationalism, imperialism, and military build-up. It was a war that few wanted but one that none could escape. In the summer of 1914, the world watched as a localized crisis in the Balkans spiraled into a global catastrophe. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, would be the spark that ignited the powder keg. But the fuse had been lit long before. To understand the Great War, we must first understand the years that led up to it, the years of growing tension and simmering resentment. Europe in the early 20th century was a continent teetering on the brink. Old rivalries festered between nations, fueled by a potent mix of nationalism and imperialism. The great powers of Europe, Germany, Austria, Hungary, France, Britain, and Russia engaged in a dangerous game of brinksmanship, each seeking to assert its dominance on the world stage. Militarism ran rampant, with each nation building up its armies and navies at an alarming rate. New technologies, from powerful artillery pieces to deadly machine guns, promised to make warfare even more devastating than ever before. Alliances were forged in secret, creating a tangled web of obligations that would drag nation after nation into the abyss. Nationalism, that potent force of identity and pride, also played a key role in the road to war. Across Europe, people felt a strong sense of loyalty to their nation-state, and many yearned for independence or unification with their ethnic brethren. This was particularly true in the Balkans, a region long known as the powder keg of Europe. And it was in the Balkans on a sunny June day in 1914 that the world would change forever. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, set off a chain reaction that quickly engulfed Europe in war. Austria-Hungary, blaming Serbia for the assassination, issued an ultimatum demanding impossible concessions. When Serbia refused to comply, Austria-Hungary declared war on July 28. Russia, bound by treaty to defend Serbia, mobilized its vast army. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, saw this as a threat and declared war on Russia on August 1st. 2 days later, Germany declared war on France, Russia's ally. Germany's plan for a quick victory rested on the Schlieffen Plan, a daring military strategy that involved a rapid invasion of France through neutral Belgium. The violation of Belgian neutrality outraged Great Britain, which had pledged to defend it. On August 4th, Britain declared war on Germany, and the Great War began in earnest. What had begun as a regional conflict in the Balkans had exploded into a full-blown European war, a war that would soon engulf the world. The early weeks of the war were marked by a series of rapid advances and retreats as both sides sought a decisive victory. However, the war quickly bogged down into a bloody stalemate along the Western Front, a 400-mile-long line of trenches that stretched from the North Sea to Switzerland. Trench warfare became the defining feature of the Western Front, a brutal and unforgiving form of combat that claimed millions of lives. Soldiers on both sides lived in squalid conditions, exposed to the elements, disease, and constant enemy fire. Rats, lice, and trenchfoot were constant companions. Attacks were often met with withering machine gun fire, artillery barrages, and poison gas, leaving thousands dead for gains of a few yards. The Battle of the Somme in 1916, one of the bloodiest battles in human history, saw over 1 million casualties for a gain of just 7 miles. The Western Front became a symbol of the futility and horror of modern war. Section 5. Beyond Europe, a world war. While the Western Front was the deadliest theatre of the war, the conflict soon spread far beyond the borders of Europe. The Ottoman Empire, allied with Germany and Austria-Hungary, fought in the Middle East, where British and Commonwealth forces clashed with Ottoman troops at Gallipoli and in Mesopotamia. Japan, allied with Britain, seized German colonies in China and the Pacific. Colonial troops from Africa, India, and Southeast Asia were drawn into the conflict, fighting for their European overlords in distant lands. The United States, initially neutral, was drawn into the war in 1917 after German submarine attacks on American ships and the discovery of the Zimmermann telegram, a secret German offer to Mexico to regain lost territories in the United States. The war at sea was also a crucial aspect of the conflict. Germany's U-boat campaign, aimed at cutting off supplies to Britain, threatened to starve the island nation into submission. The sinking of the Lusitania in 1915, which claimed the lives of over 1,000 civilians, including 128 Americans, outraged world opinion and pushed the United States closer to war. Section 6. New technologies changing the face of battle. World War I witnessed the introduction of new technologies that would forever change the face of warfare. The machine gun, capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, transformed infantry combat, turning offensive assaults into suicidal charges. Artillery, more powerful and accurate than ever before, rained death down on enemy trenches from miles away. Poison gas, first used by the Germans in 1915, added a new dimension of horror to the battlefield. Chlorine, mustard gas and other chemical agents caused excruciating burns, blindness and agonizing deaths. The use of gas warfare, condemned by many as barbaric, would leave a lasting legacy of fear and revulsion. The war also saw the rise of air power. Planes, initially used for reconnaissance, soon evolved into deadly weapons, strafing enemy trenches and engaging in dogfights high above the battlefield. Tanks, first deployed by the British in 1916, lumbered across no man's land, crushing barbed wire and blasting enemy positions with their cannons. These new technologies, while offering the promise of battlefield dominance, also increased the war's brutality and death toll. Section 7. America enters the fray, 1917. The entry of the United States into the war in April 1917 marked a turning point in the conflict. The arrival of fresh American troops and supplies boosted Allied morale and tipped the balance of power in favor of the Allies. American troops, nicknamed Doughboys, played a key role in several crucial battles in 1918, including the Battle of Belleau Wood, the Battle of Château-Thierry, and the Meuse-Argonne offensive. American industrial might also prove crucial to the Allied war effort. American factories churned out vast quantities of weapons, ammunition, and other supplies, helping to sustain the Allied war machine. The American Navy helped to break the German U-boat blockade, ensuring that vital supplies reached Britain and other Allied nations. The American entry into the war, while coming late, proved decisive in securing Allied victory. Section 8. The end of empires, 1918. By the fall of 1918, Germany and its allies were on the verge of collapse. Years of war had taken a heavy toll on the Central Powers, depleting their manpower and resources. Morale on the home front was plummeting, and mutinies erupted in the German Navy. On November 11, 1918, Germany, facing imminent defeat, signed the Armistice of Compiègne, ending the fighting on the Western Front. The Great War was over. The war had come at a terrible cost. Over 16 million soldiers and civilians had perished in the conflict, and millions more were wounded, physically and psychologically scarred by the horrors they had witnessed. The war had also toppled empires. The Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, Russian, and German empires all collapsed under the strain of war, replaced by a patchwork of new nations. The world that emerged from the war was a very different place from the one that had existed in 1914. The old order had been swept away, replaced by a new world order that was still struggling to define itself. Section 9. A World Transformed, the Legacy of World War I. The legacy of World War I is complex and multifaceted. The war had a profound impact on the 20th century, shaping international relations, political ideologies, and social and cultural trends. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war but sowed the seeds of future conflict. The treaty's harsh terms, including crippling reparations payments and territorial losses imposed on Germany, bred resentment and bitterness in Germany, creating fertile ground for the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party 2 decades later. The war also led to the creation of the League of Nations, the first international organization dedicated to preventing future wars. However, the League proved ineffective in its mission, hampered by its lack of enforcement power and the unwillingness of major powers to commit to collective security. The failure of the League of Nations to prevent World War II is a stark reminder of the challenges of maintaining peace in a world riven by national interests and ideological divides. The Great War also had a profound impact on social and cultural trends. The war's unprecedented violence led to a widespread sense of disillusionment and despair, reflected in the works of writers and artists of the lost generation. The war also accelerated social change, as women who had taken on new roles in the workforce during the conflict demanded greater rights and opportunities in the post-war era. World War I was a watershed moment in human history, a tragedy that forever altered the course of the 20th century. It is a conflict that we must remember, not only to honor the sacrifices of those who fought and died, but also to learn from its mistakes and strive to build a more peaceful and just world.